Besides the HTML helper, the form helper is probably the next most used helper. The basic function of the form helper is that it generates the needed code for form creation. It creates those forms quickly, and it streamlines validation, repopulation, and layout. The form helper has a lot of methods. We will only be covering the following methods: create, end, hidden, password, and input. As we go over these methods, we are just going to cover the general basics of each of them. You can find more information on the form helper at the following link. The first method we're going to cover is the create method. The create method creates the opening form tag. This takes two parameters, both of which are optional. The first is the model name that you're associating your form with. The second is an associated array of options. When the form tag is created, it is set with the default method of post. For our example, this can be used for either an add form or an edit form. You would type this, form, the create method, and then in our case we would pass in a model that our catalog website has, which is items. This method outputs the following. You'll notice that the action is set to our items controller add action. If we were using the create method in an edit form, it would output the following. If you look at the action, it's changed so it can reach the edit action in our items controller. It also adds this hidden field. Next is the end method, and as it implies, it creates the ending form tag. It does have a parameter, which is optional, and it's the string name that you would want to use for the submit button, or you can pass in an associated array of options. So for example, we can just say this form and then end, or we can have the end passing in the submit button string value. The following is the output from our examples. So for the first example, we get the end form tag. The output from our second example includes a div tag wrapped around an input tag, and you'll notice the value has add item. Our next method is the hidden method. The hidden method can take two different parameters. The first is the string field name, and the second is an optional associated array of options. So for example, we would type this, form, hidden, and then we would pass in the field name as the parameter. So in this case, we're passing in the ID. The output from our example is as follows, and you'll notice at the very end our attribute type is hidden. Our next method is the password method. Now the password method can take two parameters. The first is the string field name, and the second is an optional associated array of options. To use this method, we would type this, form, password, and then we're passing in as a parameter the field name. The following is the output from our example. You'll notice that our type is equal to password. The last method we're going to cover in the form helper is the input method. The input method, just like the other form helpers, is easy to use, but the input method accounts for a lot of complex situations. Just like the other form helper methods, this method takes two parameters. The first is a required field name, and the second is an optional associated array of options. Now for our basic understanding, the output of an input method includes a div container, a label tag, an input tag, and an error element if applicable. The input method also determines what type of input you need based on the field that is provided, which is our first parameter. Below is a list of our associations based on the column type. So for each column type, there's a form field that CakePHP automatically matches together. So in our column type we have string, and the form field that it will provide is a text box. And if we have a Boolean value or a tiny int, it'll give us a checkbox. And if we have a column type of text, it'll give us a text area. It also goes through a few more of the text column types. So for the next one, if the field name has a name of password or passwd or psword, it will give you a form field of password. If your column type is a type of text and it has a field name of email, it will give you a form field for email. If you have a text column type with a field name of tel, telephone, or phone, it will give you a form field of tel. Now we have three column types which deal with date or date time or time. Each of them will give you certain select boxes. So if you provide just a date column type, you'll get day, month, and year select boxes. But if you provide a date time, you'll get a day, month, year, hour, minute, and meridian select boxes. And if you have a column type of time, you'll just get an hour, minute, and meridian select boxes. So for the second parameter, now again this parameter is optional, we provide an associated array with a key value pair. Below is a list of a few different types of the options that are available. The full list can be found at this following link. So here's our option list. We can pass in an override for the type of input that will be used. We can also pass in a label, which will provide a personal text for the label tag. We can also pass in a default value, which will set the default value of that specific field. This next option, selected, is nice because we can have it select an option based on the value provided. And the last two will set the rows and columns of a text area. I've provided a screenshot of the form that we use for our add an item. So we have our create method, which is passing in the model name, and then we have a bunch of input methods. And if you look down where it says description, that is the description of our item, and we're passing in an array of options. We're providing the key of rows, and we're setting it to a value of 5. And then for our end method, we're actually passing in what we want the submit button to read. This next screenshot is of our edit form for our edit an item. There's only one difference between these two forms, and that's the very last input, which is the ID, and we're setting it to a type of hidden in our associated array. The helpers in CakePHP are meant to help, and you can definitely see that here in the FormHelper. We have 7 lines of code in our actual add template, and those 7 lines of code produce a fully functioning form. The FormHelper will definitely save you a lot of time as you start creating your own websites.